What's up everyone on the internet? Thank you for making this video part today. I am so excited because we are finally in the month of October, which means it's time to take a look at some horror films. And since last year we talked about zombie movies, I figured, you know what? Let's go the other way around. Let's talk about vampire movies. Which is funny because I don't think it wasn't until I watched the Netflix Castlevania series where I really got into vampires, more specifically Dracula. Holy crap, looking at the mythology and the history that ultimately created a character that has stood the test of time, it really speaks out about how one of history's most horrific figures has left a huge impact on pop culture. With that being said, for this video, we'll be taking a look at the archetype of all vampire films that really did set the standard, Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's funny because right before I watched the movie, I remember watching a documentary about Vlad the Impaler, who was the man that was literally behind the legend of Dracula. Because of all the horrific things that Dracula is known for, it all stems from this one person who is literally his namesake. Because while his name translates to son of the dragon to the people of Wallachia, to others, his name translates to son of the devil. Okay, if you wanted to intimidate someone just by mentioning your name, this man clearly achieved that goal because he really was the Prince of Darkness. Anyway, going into this movie, I had a pretty good understanding about the history behind Dracula, which was a nice treat because going into the movie, it quickly starts off with an origin story that is pretty accurate to what historians think about Vlad. But one of the things that really surprised me was learning about the people who were involved in making this movie, because during the opening credits, I found out that Francis Ford Coppola directed this movie. Whoa, wait, hold on. The guy who directed The Godfather, one of my most favorite movies of all time, made this movie? Suddenly my enthusiasm for this movie shot through the roof because Coppola decides to go nuts in the opening scene as we watch Vlad the Impaler literally cuss out God in his own house in a scene that is biblical, horrific, and tragic, all wrapped up in a 5-minute scene that gives you a perfect look at the character of Dracula. So with Coppola directing this movie, looking at the actors starring in it, I was really shocked because not only do we have Gary Oldman playing Dracula, but we also have John Wick himself, Keanu Reeves in this movie, alongside with Winona Ryder and Anthony Hopkins, who is playing Van Helsing. So this cast is pretty stacked. Now, one of the things that I enjoyed about this movie was Coppola's attention to detail because he really does focus on several moments from Bram Stoker's book and gives it the most surreal visualization because, holy crap, this movie is wild. Honestly, if I had to describe this movie in 2 words, it would probably be vampires and sex because this is basically Dracula's story and he is not afraid to go super freaky with women. Oh my lord, this man knows no bounds as there are several moments in this movie where he really does go to the extreme and we literally see the animalistic side to his nature. But while this movie goes all out on its R rating, at the very center of it, this is a story about tragic love. Because even though Dracula loves toying around with women like they're his playthings, the moment when he sees Winona Ryder's character, you can tell that something inside him just clicked as he feels some sort of life in his cold heart. And I love how throughout the film, we watch his character break down bit by bit. Because even though he is the Lord of Temptation, he can't bear the thought of bringing the one he loves into his world, which in this case is becoming a vampire. But when you look at the other side of the spectrum from Winona Ryder's character, she's starting to embrace this life. It pretty much plays into the message that we see in the poster, which is that love never dies. And we see it in these two characters who are so different from one another, but can't seem to live life without the other. Now, aside from Gary Oldman, who kills it as Dracula, Anthony Hopkins really steps up as Van Helsing and honestly became my second favorite character. Because before this movie, the only image I had of Van Helsing was Hugh Jackman's version of the character. And the only idea I had about vampire hunters were the Belmonts from the Castlevania series. So my general grasp on this sort of archetype was a swashbuckling character. However, while I enjoy those kind of characters, I really liked Anthony Hopkins' approach to his Van Helsing, who was more studious and more accurate to the book, given how he relies more on his brains rather than relying on fancy gadgets and fighting skills that some would say is more Batman-like. But aside from his practices, you can tell that his battle with Dracula is on a personal level, And I love how the confrontation between the two, it's almost like a relationship a hunter has with his prey. Now, who is the hunter and who is the prey? Well, that's up in the air because the story does a really good job in going back and forth on who has the upper hand. Now, even though the Dracula and Van Helsing interactions are terrific, the interaction we see between Dracula and Keanu Reeves' character is very hypnotic, given how that particular character is meant to represent the everyday man. Because while we would all love to believe that we are the Van Helsing of the story, a lot of us would have been easily seduced by Dracula, and I'll admit it, I would have fell for it too, given how he has some very persuasive ways in getting you to stay with him. And oh my god, I was not ready for those kind of scenes, as my overall emotional experience was confusion, pleasurable, and then downright horrified. Holy crap, how did Coppola get away with this film? Because the story is not afraid to go nuts, and if you decide to watch this movie, you better pray to God that nobody walks in on you during those scenes, because talk about awkward. I mean, seriously, this film is one wolf away from being an X-rated movie. Okay, aside from that little nitpick, I really did enjoy watching this film, as it not only complements Bram Stoker's novel, but is also not afraid to provide both a romantic and very realistic approach to the story that has stood the test of time. And after watching this film, you can see how it really did set a high standard for vampire movies. So if you're a fan of this particular genre, or if you're looking for something to watch during this time of year, I highly recommend you watch this movie. But be warned, this film is freaking crazy. Well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. That was my overall review on Bram Stoker's Dracula. If you like what you saw, hit the subscribe button so you guys updates from this channel. I'll see you next time with a brand new video. Bye-bye.